There we go. Good morning, everyone. All right. What's that? That's weird. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Dane with MLS Technology. Today, we're going to be doing a presentation on Matrix. Matrix is a fairly robust program, so we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about that. But before we get into that, we're going to need to discuss the webinar setup. So just some general housekeeping before we actually start with the course content. I wanted to let you guys know you're all going to be starting on mute by default. No webcam or anything like that required. We're just going to be doing this straight from the participation. Since this isn't a CE credit class, we're not going to be too concerned about, if you guys have to get up and go do something else for a little bit or whatever. But we do have a Q&A option down at the very bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the course, please make sure that you're putting them into the Q&A section, primarily just because we want to make sure that you guys are actually getting the questions posted in a way that I'll actually be able to see. The other option is the chat section. The chat section, unfortunately, doesn't really give me a lot of notification. It's not like blinking or anything like that. So if you end up posting a question in there, I might not be able to see it. But if you would like to share maybe an anecdote or some kind of commentary on what we're discussing or an example of what we're discussing, put those into the chat section. The session is going to be recorded. We'll have a link sent to the recording once class is over. But if you have any problems with audio or video during the course at all, just let me know, preferably sooner rather than later, just to ensure that we actually get this addressed. Because if you're having trouble with, if you're having trouble with the course, there's a very good chance that somebody else might be as well. So always important to make sure that we know that as quickly as possible. All right. CE credit should be sent to OREC before the end of the month. Since this is our last opportunity for CE credit this afternoon, I would suggest signing up for it if you haven't. Otherwise, we'll have to catch you in the next month. All right. So let's get this moved over. Next slide. All right. So we do have those buttons down there at the bottom. Again, the Q&A for any questions, chat for any commentary. There is a raise hand option as well. If you do end up having any problems, and maybe typing it out is going to be a little cumbersome, or if there's some other issue that you guys would like to make us aware of, hit that raise hand option, and we'll have the ability to give you an unmute, so you can unmute yourself and ask a question, or if you had some commentary you'd like to add. This is a 2-hour-long class, so I'm not too concerned about getting slowed down with a question or two here or there. This is more an open-ended forum. We're just trying to present you guys some of the basic stuff that you might need to know. But if you have a nuanced question, or if there's something that you guys are hoping to glean from this class, don't hesitate to ask a question in Q&A or hit that raise hand option, and we can unmute you. All right. Also, if you guys are joining us on a mobile device, in case you guys are joining on a phone or a tablet of some kind, the screen is just going to be a little bit different. You may not see those buttons automatically at the bottom, but if you if you tap the screen, it should be able to pull up the buttons down there at the bottom, and you guys can do the exact same stuff. So again, raise hand. That one's especially important if you guys are on mobile, because typing on mobile isn't always as convenient as it is on a keyboard, but same thing goes for chat. If you guys have any commentary, don't hesitate. All right. Let me switch over to Firefox. Oh, and of course it cleared my stuff. So interesting fact, everybody in the system had to change their password. I know we had a little bit of an incident recently with the passwords being required for everyone to change. That was also us on the service desk and internally as well. So it was quite a lot. Oh, no worries, Miranda. All right. So as I mentioned, today's course is going to be primarily focused on Matrix. We're going to talk about a couple integrations here and there, but everything that we're going to be focusing on today will be revolving around the main MLS system that we have. A lot of the other systems that you guys have access to through our MLS, you'll have at least some tie-in to Matrix. So for instance, Matrix and Realist are both run by CoreLogic. They share tax record data. We're going to be discussing that a little bit later. Transaction Desk also collects information directly from Matrix. Same thing with RPR. If you guys haven't actually gone through the RPR class, I would very strongly suggest it. I think it's very legitimately one of the most useful tools that you guys have as realtors. This is a tool that's been provided through the National Association of Realtors, and any of the data that's been put into Matrix will actually feed over into RPR. Same thing goes with Sentry Key, showing time. So this MLS system that we have is actually foundational to everything else that we're going to be using in all of our other classes. So to get us started, in order to get into Matrix, you guys just need to go to mlstechnology.com and then click on the Matrix link. Once you guys are inside Matrix, you'll have this home page that starts you up. It's got a bunch of these little sections around the screen. There's only one that's actually solidly planted in place. That's our news and alerts section. If you guys haven't had this experience yet, just so you guys are aware, this is where you'll see any notices of if you have an anticipated closing date that's a little bit off or needs to be adjusted, or if you guys have an expiring listing coming up soon, or pretty much anytime there's something that's happening with one of your listings and we need to make you aware of it, it's going to be popping up in this news and alerts section if we don't also email you as well. So just make sure that you guys are logging in at least semi-regularly just to be able to see this. We do get some complaints from time to time that we haven't notified people enough, even though we send emails and try to make sure to prevent people from getting fines. But this is also where we're going to be posting any of those expiration notices, anticipated closing date expirations, things like that. So the other items that you see on this screen are actually what are referred to as widgets. Now, each of these widgets has a little header. And if you notice here, whenever I put my cursor over that hot sheets section, I can click and drag and it'll move it out of place. So notice there's that little dotted line underneath where it was. And we can move this around, and you'll notice that the dotted line kind of follows where it is that I might be dropping it to kind of give me an indication of what's going to happen to the rest of the screen if I were to leave it in that location. Now, another thing that we can do if we don't want one of these, so for instance, if I had this Matrix Learning Lab and this home visit widget on there, there's a couple different options for us to either collapse the widgets. So for instance, if I want to use this occasionally, or if I don't remember where this was and I kind of just don't want it to disappear on me, I can hit this little minimize button. This works the same way that it does with a lot of your programs on your computer, just collapses things down. And then there's also a little X icon. What this does is it's actually going to be putting it under this additional widget. So what happens is that when you click that X, so like let's do it with hot sheets, for instance. When I click that X, notice it actually adds that to this list under my additional. And then if I want to take something out of my additional section to put it back on my screen, I just click and drag, and it'll be put out there in the spot wherever those dotted lines appear. So if I needed my hot sheets back on the screen, I can put those back. If I don't need to see it right now, I can, again, just collapse it, expand it when I need it. Or if I'm just not using it at all and it's just cluttering up my screen real estate, I can hit the little X to get rid of it. Additionally, if you guys end up dumping a bunch of stuff that you don't want into the additional widget, you can collapse the additional widget so that they even take up less space. Though I have found, at least from our service desk side experience, people that get rid of a bunch of the widgets and then collapse their additional widget oftentimes forget that there was some of those options on there. So be cognizant of which items you're actually going to use, or if you perceive that that might be something you'll use again in the future. But I'm pretty happy with how I have this laid out. Everything's on a screen all at once. These are all the main things that I'm actually interested in. I've got my listings, my favorite searches, external links, market watch, hot sheets. And then up at the top right here, I've got the only widget that I would actually recommend that everybody make use of and everybody leave on their screen. It's the search widget. Now, the search widget has just a couple basic uses. I find that at least on the help desk side of things, or for most of you guys who are just getting a call from another agent and they're telling you about, this, that, or the other listing that they're interested in having your buyer take a look at, they'll oftentimes just start off with giving you the address of the property. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If they don't have the MLS number available, or if they don't know it off the top of their head, which is even less likely, we're going to need to have that space available for us to search for the address. So right out the gate, if I needed to search for a listing, I can just start putting in the house number and the street name. Now, it's important to recognize that on the house number, it's pretty self-evident. It's just the beginning of the address, the actual house's number. For the street name, though, this is where we're going to get into at least a little bit of how Matrix differentiates between parts and pieces of an address. The street name for this property might be South Riverside Drive, but instead, what the street name is looking for is just the name itself. So drop the drive. We don't need any pre or post directionals, so no south. So that the only thing that we're searching by is just going to be the house number and the street's name, just the name. So when I click on search, it's going to pull up any of the listings that happen to match that particular two sets of data. Now, a pretty huge majority of the time, that's going to find the address that you're actually interested in. But if you guys do find yourself needing to add a little bit more nuance, we're going to be covering how to do that a little bit later, so not to worry. Now, when we first landed on our search results page, we're going to be discussing this a lot more in depth later, but you'll notice that over on the left-hand side, we have these MLS numbers. The MLS numbers actually have a little hidden pattern to them in case you guys haven't been exposed to this. So at the beginning of the MLS numbers are going to be the year that this particular listing was added. Now, in this case, it's not 10 AD. What this is actually 2010. So we just drop the 20 at the beginning of every number. You may end up finding yourself in a situation where when you search for a particular property, you find a 6-digit MLS number. And those 6-digit numbers, let me see. There we go. Those 6-digit MLS numbers, like this one up at the top here, or number 10 here, those are actually indicating to us that those came out during the aughts. So 2001 to 2009, it's just going to drop the preceding 0. But otherwise, we can effectively just see what year it was that this particular listing was added. Now, I do want to point out, just because a listing was added in a certain year doesn't mean that that's when it was sold or when it was eventually like expired out and then ended up having a new listing put in. So we might actually find that, let's say we've got 2 from 2014 that ended up expiring. We've got 1 that closed in 2015. So even though we can see in this case, all right, this particular property was on the market for at least a full year and then some, we can't necessarily assume that, oh, well, this was just entered just in 2015 and sold immediately for, obviously a relatively high amount of money for a property to sell quickly. So You can extrapolate a little bit from this, but we're going to have to talk about the listing data a little bit more in depth later. Now, beyond our basic search function and a couple of the handy widgets that I'm going to be sending you guys video tutorials on, the homepage is really not where you're going to be spending most of your time. You're going to be spending a lot more time on the search functions. Before we actually start tracking down listings that we're interested in sending off to our clients, though, we need to make sure that our contact information is up to date. If there's any photos that we want to add of ourselves, that get the profile set up, all of that needs to be prepared. I would at least recommend that you guys prepare that in advance of actually finding things and setting stuff up, setting up your clients, etc. So up at the top right corner here, we've got working as. It says training agent. Depending on if you guys are on a team, you might not see this working as. If you're not on a team, if you are, you can switch between different individuals, but you'll always have access to where it says training agent will be your name. Click on the little icon to the right of that, arrow pointing down. If you have a team, you can switch between those other individuals, but you'll always have access to settings, help, mobile, and log out. Let's click on settings. And then up at the top left of this section, my information. Now, what my information gives us access to is all of the data that was actually imported over from our membership data. Now, the membership data might not always be correct. I should point out that if you guys have any information that's been added on here by default, so like if you show up at this page and it doesn't have the correct information, that's indicating that there's something wrong on our membership data. This isn't something that's particularly common, but I would suggest if you find yourself in a situation where you're needing to update your name or update your phone number, what office you work for, whatever the case may be, get in contact with us over at the service desk, or more specifically, if you have updated information to add, get in contact with our membership team. Now, once all of that's updated, it'll cycle back over into Matrix, and you'll be able to actually see that here. But let's say that you guys arrive on this page, nothing's wrong with it, you guys are just ready to add some information. The details that you're adding on this page will be filled in on headers and footers that'll be on your printed reports. It'll show up on your CMA cover sheets. You can add your own email signature that doesn't rely on this information at all in case you guys need to add updated logos, et cetera, But this information is also going to arrive on the One Home profile. Now, when clients get sent information, the One Home portal is actually where they're going to be viewing any of the listing data. That One Home portal has a little profile that it's going to show for you as an agent. So if there's information that you guys wanted to add, or if there's information that needs to be updated, whatever, it all is going to be shown on this initial page. Now, if we have a situation where, let's say your name is Robert, but you like going by Bob, but all of your bills need to come in as Robert or whatever the case may be. Up at the top, we can see I've got first name and last name. Let's say that training isn't really my first name. I prefer to go by trainer. There we go. This little override option allows me to keep whatever information is available on our membership side, but then also make a little minor adjustment for if I've got different name or a different spelling of it than what the membership data can allow, that kind of stuff. So just keep that in your back pocket if you guys do end up wanting to make a minor adjustment. But again, if it's just completely wrong information, get in contact with us. All right, enough about that. Let's head over to this header and footer section. Make sure to save if you guys have made any changes. On the header and footer page, this actually used to be one of the more important sections in Matrix. But since they've changed the portal that the clients are going to, this is no longer what's going to be appearing whenever the clients show up to take a look at any listing data you've sent them. This is only going to be showing up on any of the prints that you guys create. So literally any reports, quick CMA, regular CMA, any printed reports that you're collecting from listing data, all of which we're going to be covering a little bit later. But it's fairly simple. If you guys are brand new to the system, you're going to be presented with a little option to choose a theme. So in advance of actually filling in any of the details, or maybe even updating this photo or adding a photo of yourself, or even maybe a logo of your company, you guys get the option to choose between a bunch of different themes that you can kind of start off with. So green is my favorite color. So originally I had this golf course. I'm going to choose this boardwalk instead. Once you guys have selected one and hit preview, it'll bring you to that page that I already had up. But what we can do here is we can take a look at the preview of our header. You can add a photo if you would like, and then you can even change what contact information is going to appear on there down here at the very bottom. So these little drop downs that we see are actually going to allow us to make changes to what pieces of information are going to show up on that little header that shows there. If you guys do end up wanting to change the background, you can click on this different banner theme image. We also have an update or upload a custom banner image. This is going to allow you guys to actually put your own image in the background there. So if you have maybe some corporate branding that you guys need to oblige or whatever, you can add that in there and it'll stay behind it. You can also customize the theme or the colors. So for instance, instead of it being this white and blue, I can make changes to this. So instead of that blue, I want to change this over to a nice stark green, because again, that's the best color in the world. And we've got that updated there. Not quite as legible now, so try to make sure that you guys are adjusting this appropriately for, visibility, accessibility, etc. At the very bottom of the header and footer page, we've got the footer section, which kind of makes sense, right? This is going to be the same exact way. Instead of it being the information that appears at the top of every report, this is going to be at the end or the bottom of every report. So you can choose whether or not you actually want to have a print footer at all. If you guys got all the most important information up in your header, and this just seems unnecessary, then that's perfectly fine. You can just say, no, I don't want one. And whenever you guys try to print off a report, it won't include that. Easy peasy. All right. Next, we've got our CMA cover sheet. This is going to be similar to the options that we just explored. On the information tab, you guys can make an override if need be. So again, if you guys made a change on one section, you may end up wanting to double check this is correct. But if you notice, I made that modification to trainer here instead of training agent. And when I get over to the CMA cover sheet, it's already got the information updated in here. So you may not actually have to come in here to verify that, if it's Robert and Bob, Bob's not going to have to worry about checking to see if Bob is showing up here. But I did want to point out something. The CMA cover sheets, you can make a CMA for everyone. And in fact, that's actually something we'll be discussing later in our class this afternoon. But there are occasions where it might not be great to have a cell phone number given to somebody so early in the transaction. So you guys can actually put in a different phone number on here than what you guys would normally be presenting for clients that you guys have already established a firm relationship with. So if you guys want that CMA cover sheet to just have your office phone number, you guys can put that on there. Finally, we've got our email signature section. This is really simple. If you guys have an email signature that you're already using, copy it, paste it into this screen down here, and save it. Easy peasy. Nothing else that you guys have to do. If you have logos, if you have banners, if you have certain fonts, bold, italic, different sizes, none of that'll matter. You just copy it from wherever you're using it, paste it in here, and that'll be your email signature even when you're sending stuff from Matrix. So we used to try and cover some of the details on this, but they updated it, which made this way more useful because the upload image thing is a real pain. So this is much simpler. All right. And finally, we have the one home section. This is the most important information, at least in my opinion. What's going to end up happening is that whenever we send out links to our clients, they get a email that just says, hey, check out this. It shows a little preview of the listings. And there's going to be a button that says open properties or open listings. When they click on that, it brings up a whole different website that actually is just customized for clients. So it's still the same information that you guys had access to in Matrix, except it's been parsed out and of course purged of any of the confidential information. So like compensation amounts, what kind of listing agreement you guys have, that kind of stuff. Any of the things that are publicly accessible information or non-transactional information should be able to appear without any issue, and people can learn anything and everything they need about the property. But it's going to leave out any of the details that you guys would need to know on your end. So not to worry, you guys aren't sending out information that shouldn't be sent out. But on that One Home profile or portal, you're going to have a profile that allows you to add in a custom photo. In this case, I just uploaded a photo of a really cool looking living room. And then I've got some contact information in here. Again, notice this is importing over a bunch of the details that we already had, but it does have a separate little piece of information here for a Twitter link, Facebook, Instagram, your license number, if you wanted to add that on there. And you can even put on a team name if you guys are a part of a team. And then down towards the bottom, we have the profile content. This is where you guys can put in your synopsis about yourself, let everybody know what your deal is. And there's also a section down at the base of this, the video link, where you can put in a YouTube or Vimeo link. Coincidentally, this is the only spot in the entire Matrix system that you guys can put a YouTube link. In case you guys haven't worked with that in the past, we have a section on listings for yeah, we did cover this. We have a section at the bottom of listings for the virtual tours. Virtual tours can come from a variety of different locations. If it's an independent website, if it's a video, drone footage, stuff like that, you can't post those to YouTube. So the only place that you guys can actually put a YouTube link is for your bio on One Home. But, all right, let's head back up to the top here. We're going to go back to our homepage. So on our homepage, we have a section there that says My Favorite Searches. We're going to be discussing how to run searches, but we're going to add a favorite search to this My Favorite Searches. We also have a Market Watch section and a Hot Sheets section, both of which are effectively just variants of the search functionality. But if we want to get in and start looking for actual listing data, we're going to have to head up to this section up at the top that says Search. Our search functions are broken down into 4 different categories. We've got our residential, which is going to be all the residential properties, commercial, vacant land, leasing, which is residential sales. And then we've got a cross-property search that combines all 4 of those into one search. So when I go to this cross-property search, or any of these others, we've got the residential, quick res, quick com, quick land, quick lease. On cross-property, we've got quick xprop. I'm going to pull this one up as just kind of a basic search for now. So what this does is it actually shows us a search that allows us to do any of the property types that we saw from earlier. And we also have the option to search for any property subtypes as well. Now, typically you're going to want to just do one or the other, or make sure that you guys are combining appropriately. So for instance, if I'm doing residential or lease and I do condo or house, that'll probably be fine. If I do commercial and then house, hey, look at that, 0 matches. So just make sure that you guys are appropriately combining those. When we get into the more targeted searches, so like once we start doing an actual search with the residential search, the property subtype section is going to be much simpler. It's just going to show you the things that are relevant to just residential, just like the lease would offer. Same thing goes with commercial. It's going to show the things that are specifically commercial properties, and vacant land will show things that don't have too many buildings on them. Now, the other elements of the search that every part of the system will always have a status over here on the left. We'll always have the property subtype. And then there's always going to be this middle section here where we actually have all of our location data. Now, the location data is fairly simple. We've got a map search, and then it breaks down into the address if we wanted to search by address, school district, city, county, zip code. We can also search by township, range, and section, which is going to be handy for those of you guys working with vacant land. But we also have a subdivision, grade school, high school, middle school. All of those are going to be available to you guys on all of the different kinds of searches. So regardless of whether or not you're looking for vacant land or commercial property, it won't matter. You'll always have all of these options on there. On the right-hand side, the price will almost always be available, or the price will always be available. Whether or not it's automatically turning anything that you guys are doing into the thousands is going to be dependent on if you're searching for a lease property. But then the rest of these details are actually going to change based on what kind of property type you're looking for. Now, lot square footage and lot acres, easy. Those are going to be on all of them. But total number of bedrooms, you don't need that for vacant land or commercial properties. What year built, that's not going to be relevant for vacant land. So this cross-property search, I have seen people that actually just, this is the only place that they run searches. It's very uncommon. Most of the time, if you guys are getting in here, unless you guys just happen to have an incredibly diverse portfolio of properties that you're working with, you're probably going to end up jumping into one of the specific categories. Since the residential category is the one that's the most common, I'm going to jump right into there. Now, on the residential search, like I said, we've still got our status, property subtype. Here's some extra items that are going to be specific for residential sales. So we've got contingent, corporate, relocate, lender owned, short sale, multiple parcels. Then we've got our middle section here. Again, this time it's just showing all of our basics for the location. But then underneath that, it's got stuff that's more targeted towards, again, the residential side of things. Up at the top, again, we've got our price. We can add an MLS number if we had an MLS number. We can add commas in between each of those to search for multiple at once. And then we've got a bunch of the details that are going to be focused on the property's attributes: bedroom, bathroom, number of stories, the square footage, and then the lot itself is going to be the focus of the lot: square footage, acres, year built is a possibility if you guys want to find something that was built after the lead-based paint was outlawed, etc. Towards the bottom of the page, we actually have some additional fields. We're going to be covering this in a minute, but since I don't want to cover that yet, let me remove those. And this is going to show us just the basic. So this is what everybody should start off with before they start customizing it. Now, there's a couple of important things to remember when we're on the search screen. So first and foremost, the status options over here at the top left allow you guys to search for active, pending, closed, any of the coming soon listings, so on and so forth. Whenever you guys click on one of the options besides coming soon and active, it's going to automatically add in a 6-month time frame using a relative time frame. So it's just going to be 0 to 180 days in the past. Now, by default, you may have noticed that this active was the only thing that was automatically selected. That's a system default for all of the different basic quick searches. So whenever I go to quick land, look at that. Active is the only thing in here. Everything else is empty. No additional fields, no criteria added in anywhere. Active is the only option. So when you guys land in here, if you're needing to find some comps, or if you guys wanted to search for historical information, make sure to check that checkbox over here and make sure that your time frame is either the relative time frame, or you guys can actually use this calendar icon to set a specific time frame. So you click on one date, click on the other, and it'll automatically fill in the dates there for you. You can also manually type that stuff in, but it's not typically recommended. Now, if we end up removing the date, so for instance, if I just went here to closed and then just remove the date, I'm going to see that I have, what, 423,000 listings were closed in our system ever. So removing that particular piece of data, so the actual date, opened it up so that it's actually showing me anything and everything. So that's part of the reason why active is just active. No date range added, just active. Same thing goes with the rest of these details as well. So for instance, if I don't put in a price, you can see that I've got 2,081 matches right now. 2,081 matches is actually how many residential properties there are that are currently active. So it makes it really easy to kind of keep track of that number. This is actually going to update in real time as well. So for instance, if I start adding in a price, let's say we'll do 250 to 350. So I've got the price put in, and now suddenly my live count is down to 319 matches. If I start narrowing it down further, so like let's say we wanted to do 4+ bedrooms, what that means is that I'm looking for 4, and then the plus at the end is going to indicate or more. Let's say that I don't want to have too much space in the house, as if anybody ever says that. 3,000 minus, there we go. So I want to have 3,000 or less square feet. So I can have that little minus sign, the same way that we did with the bedrooms where we did 4+, we can do 3,000 minus. A little bit more practical example of that would be, let's say that we wanted to just search for any properties that are under 350. We can put 350 minus, and again, this is going to be searching for all properties. And since I have not put in any location details, it's going to be looking throughout our entire MLS. So 350 minus, 4 or more bedrooms, 3,000 or less square feet, and I got 248 matches. If I wanted to double check where all of these are located, there is a map option at the top of the screen, as well as down here at the bottom. It's kind of a floating bottom. And then we also have the results button as well. Now, if we go to the results, this is a page that we've already seen. You can see that these actually are all over the place. We've got Akili, Adair, Ardmore, Atoka, Bartlesville, Beggs. Like, this is pretty spread out. If I go to my map, I can see all of these dots have been added to the map, indicating to us where all of those properties are located. Again, since we didn't give any location specificity, it's just everywhere. Now, I'm going to actually cover how to use this map search in the latter half of class, so not to worry. We have a break scheduled for the top of the hour. So we'll take our break and then come back and start messing with the map. But I'm going to jump back to my criteria for now. So let's say that we are going through, we've added in as much of the detail as we want for the client that we're working with, but let's say that there's some things that we cannot find. So for instance, my client kept on mentioning that they're foodies and that they want to make sure that they have a gas range, or maybe they're wine connoisseurs and they're just wanting to make sure that there's a wine cellar on the property. There's a lot of cool things that we've actually added to the property data form. So whenever people are adding listings into the system, there's a bunch of required fields that they need to add. Now there's some optional fields. So most of the required stuff is going to be pretty obvious, but let's say that we do have that person that's like, I gotta have a gas range. Like, that's a requirement for any property I'm looking at. I come down here to this additional field section, click add, and it presents me with a list of all of the fields that are available in our system. Now, as you can see, this list is huge, just so many different items. I mean, we keep track of information both from the perspective of active listings, but we also have a lot of closed data, when it was pending, who was the listing or selling agent. I mean, the variety of information that we have on here is just massive. So if you guys would like to, let's say that you do end up in a situation where you need to track down the appliances that are involved, you can scroll down and find appliances included, maybe even add in the appliance connection as well. I can hold down the control key to select both of those at once and then click add. So what I'm doing is I'm taking it from this available list and adding it to my selected fields. When I go back, I now see that I've got both of those options down here at the bottom. So here's where my additional fields show up. If I wanted to add in even more, I can click on this add/remove. Let's say that I wanted to do whether or not a property has gated access. Now, if I come down here and check in the G's, it doesn't look like I have it. Well, let's see if it's maybe not at the beginning of the word gated. Nope, doesn't appear that I'm finding it. you may remember when you're actually filling out the property data form that there was a section there for gated access to be covered, but in our case, I'm not finding it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to our Forms and Contracts button and then go under the MLS specific forms. And the property data forms that you guys have to fill out in order to put a listing into the system is going to be under the matrix data forms. I'm going to head over to the residential options, since that's what we're covering. And this shows me everything that we're going to need to have filled out whenever we're adding that listing into the system. So here's where we got our property subtype, or house size, list price, so on and so forth. If I keep scrolling down here, there's a section here where it has the gated access. All right. So I need to add gated access to my search, but what it is it's actually under a section called HOA amenities. So let's head back to Matrix. This time I'm going to search for HOA. Here we go. HOA amenities, click add. And when I go back, this time I can actually search for, all right, we've got appliance connections. We need to make sure that the range is gas. We need to make sure that there's a range or oven included. There we go. And then I also need to make sure that it's gated access. Boom. Now, as we were going through, you guys might have noticed our live count was pretty dramatically decreasing and quickly. So if I take off gated access, I just held Control to deselect it. Take off range / oven is included, 68. Take off the gas range, 248. So as I went through and selected all of those, I could watch that number drop until finally it reached 0. Now, if we have maybe a different option that we wanted to search, so like let's say that instead of it being gated access, we wanted to search for whether or not a property has the USDA rural development option available for it. If I go back to my residential data form, scroll up just a little bit here, I've got my USDA rural development. And again, what category is it showing up under? Finance options. So just like we did with gated access and HOA amenities, if I need to search for properties that are going to be USDA rural development or VA loans or whatever the case may be, I come back to here. I do a search for finance options. Just typed in fin and it's already there. Here we go, finance options, click add and head back. And let's see if we actually have an option for that. I'm going to do rural development. 17 matches still. Hey, so we're still in business. Now, all of this has been pretty fun to at least track something down. But as a reminder, since we did not put in any location details, when I go to my map, these properties are going to be all over the place. We've got some up in the northern corner of the state. We've got some down at the center bottom, down in the Durant area, is that right? Oh yeah, to the east or west of Durant. Anyway, so we've got a bunch of different options on here. If I wanted to start exploring these, because maybe my client's just interested in anywhere in the state, maybe they got a remote job or something, they're excited to just settle down wherever they would like to with whatever specifications they'd like, we can finally get in there and take a look at these listings. Now, whenever we open up the results page is actually something that stayed the same way since I think they said it was 1992 when they started doing the digital versions of the MLS data. Now that means that this information has been in the same format for a very, very long time. How this is laid out, at least at the moment, is that we have the MLS number over here on the left. We've got another column immediately to the right of that. That's going to be the view photos option. It's important to note, because we do have people call in occasionally on this, the photos are actually not required on all listings. In fact, there's actually only one required photo listing type, and that's the auction photos or auction listings. Auction listings have to have a photo uploaded that includes the word auction on it. Now, that doesn't even necessarily mean you have to have a photo of the property, but because we do require that whenever there's a photo uploaded to the system, it's got to have at least one photo that shows the front exterior of the property or an aerial photo. Once you guys add a photo onto the listings, make sure that you at least have that base requirement met. So again, auction or not, if you guys are adding a photo, you have to have a front external shot of the house or an aerial photo of the property, preferably the front if it's actually got a house on it. Now on each of the listings, there's also going to be an icon that shows view map. This is going to show us the mapping for each of the different listings. And I'm not sure if it's actually going to show that pop up. Let me verify. Oh, lovely. It doesn't. Well, we're going to have to deal with that separately. Okay. There is actually a little icon here for view map. This is going to allow you guys to see effectively just a contextual map showing where this particular listing actually is physically located. Every single listing in our system has to be mapped, and it's also something that has to be mapped either manually by the agent, or there is an automated system that checks it, but the agent is required to make sure that all of the listings are actually mapped correctly. Any errors or omissions are always on the agent's responsibility. Even if the system decided to map it incorrectly, if you didn't go back and double check that it was in the right spot, it's still technically your fault. But either way, we do have this view map. This is going to show for every single listing in our system, since it's required to be mapped on every single listing. Similarly, there's some icons over here that you're going to see that show up on every listing. We've got the history icon, a little start a transaction option to go directly into transaction desk with these listing details. And then we also have a link to RPR. This is going to be what's called a deep link. So whenever we click on the link for this particular listing's RPR button, it's going to go to that particular property's RPR page. So it's a really quick and easy way to kind of navigate to something if you guys wanted to print off a report for a client that you guys are working with, or whatever the case may be. So it just jumps right in. Which one did I click on? I think the 816. Oh no, yeah, it was the 861. Okay. So right out the gate, I can just jump in here, create a report, send that off to my client, let them know what this property is all about. Additionally, we have a bunch of different columns in here. I'm on the system default, right? Yep. We've got a bunch of different columns of information. So our status, if you guys remember on the criteria page, our status was actually something that we already included. All of these are active. We have one that's contingent on the buyer's property selling, but that's okay. The rest of these are all houses as well. We've got school district, which is actually just all over the place, Broken Arrow, Claremore, Coweta, etc. And then we've got our address. Coincidentally, whenever you guys click on this address link, it does the exact same thing that the map button does. So this will just pull up a little pop-up, let you guys know where it is located, and that's it. We also have our bedroom, full bath, half bath, and garage capacity. Each of those are going to be, simplified versions of things. Just remember what each of those stands for. We've got what year built it was, and then the square footage as reported by the agent. Now, you may notice that actually, without even trying to find this, I did actually happen upon a property that has 0 for the square footage listed. Now, not to worry, we are still in the residential search. If I go back here, you can see it's the quick res. I didn't actually put in anything that would prevent it from showing me this. But in this case, this particular listing actually doesn't have the square footage reported. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no square footage in the house. This isn't some Harry Potter situation where it's bigger on the inside or something. So I'm going to go over here to the MLS number, and let's take a look at what this property is listed as. So when we get in here, we can see the property's information, just the basic details up here at the top, school district, subdivision, if it's multiple parcels being sold together or not. But we've also got a section here for house size. Now, the house size is just going to be an estimate that's meant to at least indicate to other agents what the property's size is. But on the house actual square footage report, it actually says 0 and NR. Now, if you guys have entered your own listings in the past, you'll know this already, but there's only 3 valid sources for what the square footage is allowed to be put from. So if you guys have a county assessor's office information, which is going to be hopefully up to date, the tax records have that on there, you guys can use the square footage from the tax record, as long as it's accurate according to the client. You guys can also upload an appraisal number. So for instance, if you already got an appraisal done for the property and you have that number ready, you guys can add that on there from the appraisal. Now it's worth noting, you have to have that appraisal paperwork available. If we do end up having somebody get in contact with us and they've got, oh, well, this square footage that they're reporting is actually just something that the owner gave them. They don't have paperwork on it. We will require you to change the square footage and remove that unless you can provide the paperwork. Same thing goes with the building permit. Building permit is a perfectly valid source, but again, you have to have the documentation on it. The only reason why I'm clarifying those stipulations on the appraisals and the building permit is because if it's on the tax record information that you got it, I can go look at the tax record through Realist. So we don't have to take too long to verify that. Also worth mentioning, you notice how there are sections here for square feet 2, square feet 3. These aren't the sequel and threequel to square footage. What this is actually mentioning is the main residence is going to have to be the initial square footage space. The square feet 2 is going to be any additional building, and square feet 3 is any additional building beyond that. We have, this is an annoying trend more than an actual problem trend, but we do have some people that have been adding in all of the square footage for multiple buildings into the main square footage space. That is not allowed. That's actually something that we pretty explicitly lay out in our rules and regulations. But just as a reminder, since we have been noticing this trend recently, whenever you're adding a listing into the system and it has multiple buildings, you put the main residence on the primary square footage, and then you put any additional buildings in the separate spaces. Otherwise, that could be considered a violation. Or excuse me, not could be, it is a violation. Anyway, this particular listing doesn't have a photo available. So even though I got to explain the square footage thing, let's move on to this next item. So here we have a listing. Again, just like we saw before, we've got some basic details up here at the top. We've got some extra details here. Lot description has got mature trees on it. We've got some remarks that the agent actually added into the system. We've been getting a lot of flack recently for the amount of characters in our system. So the public remarks allows for, I think it's 510 characters at the moment. We don't have any plans to increase that in the near future because we actually just doubled it recently. But if we do end up having enough people raising a stink about it, which please do, we can try and increase that. But we, it is what it is for now. This is still way more information than I think most people would actually read about a property. They're more interested in the specifications. But anyway, a little further down, we've got a bunch of the basic details about the property. If the agent has provided it, there is a section here for additional rooms. This isn't something that's required, so we don't actually see it too often on listings. Let's see if I can actually find one that has it. Hey, there we go. So what the rooms do is actually allows any of the sellers to actually see where each of the different rooms are located. This could be incredibly important. So if you guys are adding a listing to the system, I would very seriously recommend adding the rooms on there. If only just for those individuals out there that are trying to find a property that maybe has specific rooms on the first floor, second floor, whatever the case may be. My mom has pretty severe arthritis. It limits her mobility for the most part. So whenever they were looking for a new house, I grew up in a 2-story house. They ended up deciding to go for a ranch style home because going up and down the stairs was just a risk at that point. So whenever they were looking for a property, they could either look for just a ranch style home, something that's the single story or something like that, or what they can do is actually search for a property that has the master bedroom on the first floor. And maybe if my dad wanted to have like a man cave or a game room or something else, they could have a second floor. But as long as the master bedroom was on the first floor, it wasn't a deal breaker. So adding these details into your listing data could actually be the differentiating factor on whether or not a particular buyer has any interest in the property at all. Because again, if my parents didn't see that the master bedroom was on the first floor, they just literally wouldn't even bother looking at the rest of the property. And if those details were just not filled in because it wasn't required, you might actually be missing out on a sale just because you didn't put that in there. So, but that's just commentary on making sure that all of your listings have as much information as possible. Anyway, up here at the top of the page, we've got the photos. This is where we can kind of scroll through each of the photos that have been added to the listing. It looks like this one's a new construction. Let's find something that's a little bit older. There we go. Now you can scroll through these photos. This is similar to the way that we could scroll through the photos on the previous screen if we had been looking at the results and clicked on the photos icon. But there's also an option to either open all of them, which shows me the thumbnail for each of the different photos. Then I can click on them to zoom in. But there's also the option whenever you guys are looking at the photos here to just click play and it'll do a little slideshow. Or you can even put this into what's called a full screen mode, but it's still kind of small. And you can put a slideshow on that as well. So if you guys have a client that's kind of looking over your shoulder, or you guys are in the office and you wanted to show this to them, you can kind of have that playing in the background. Underneath the photos, we also have a bunch of different icons. We have the button to open the separate window with the photos. We have the view map option. Notice that the photos and the map are actually both showing up here at the top as well. So if you guys have a listing that has the tax details, the photos, the map all filled in, all of that information will be available up at the top here. I'm going to cover that in a minute. We also have the history, again, another tab that's up here at the top. We've got 3 buttons that are going to be going to Realist. Either the Realist tax basic information, which again, tab up here at the top for that. We've got the Realist map, which is actually going to open up a separate window with matrix loaded in it and try and find it. In this case, not finding it. Does it have the? Oh, it doesn't have the parcel number in there. That's why. And then we also have a couple icons for what used to be called Find, but is now called the Realtor.com Professional Search. A little bit more clunky name, but still a very useful tool. Not too many people end up using it. And if I'm being honest, part of the reason why most people don't actually end up using that is because there's also a link down here for RPR. Again, RPR blows pretty much every other product that's available that does even close to the same thing out of the water. Just a substantial tool. Anyway, we also have a little icon over here for data co-op. This is actually a tool that's very specific to CoreLogic and Matrix. What data co-op is allowing us to do is everybody that uses a CoreLogic MLS product, so Matrix, for instance, has the option to opt into the data co-op system. That means that there is effectively a national database of all of the different CoreLogic products with all of the different listing information that's stored on them. Now, again, they still have to opt in, so it's kind of a quid pro quo kind of situation. I will show our MLS data if you show us all of yours, but it's also going to have some pretty significant limitations because, as I mentioned, it's only going to be showing us things that are in the CoreLogic MLS data systems. If it's not in one of those systems, you guys might not see it. Now, we do have that same basic limitation to RPR where people still have to opt in, but instead of it being something that's reliant on CoreLogic's underlying database, this is actually showing us every MLS that's willing to share their data, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was somewhere like 70 to 80% of the country's MLSs have shared data with RPR. So it's way more comprehensive place than most people realize. Also on the second line, we have the supra key or sentry lock box information. If you guys have any experience with that, cool. Those buttons are there if you guys need them. We also have a little link here for start a transaction. Out of curiosity. Oh, it's a disclaimer. I was about to say this one doesn't have the disclosures uploaded. Let me find one that does. There we go. So we've got a little icon here that goes directly into starting a transaction with this particular listing. And for listings that do have disclosures uploaded on them, there's a little icon here that says view documents. Now that view documents is going to show us any of the appraisals that the listing agent has added, or any of the disclosures if they've added those on there, which again are required on listings that require disclosures. So all of those links underneath the photos are just kind of quick ways to get into photos or tax or whatever the case may be. But most of these, besides obviously the documents here, are going to also be found up here at the top in these tabs. But it is 10 o'clock. So when we get back, we're going to run through those, and then we're going to start talking about the map search. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put our video back on the screen and get the music going, hopefully. And then I will see you guys back here at 10:15 or 10:10, excuse me, not 10:15. Yeah, it's not a CE class. What it'll matter. But I'll see you guys back here at 10:10. All right. Wow, that was embarrassing. Uh, it's like one little link in the chain breaks and everything just kind of stops functioning properly. All right. So welcome back, guys. So where we left off, we had just found a listing that we were looking at. We've been going previous and next to try and find which listing was going to provide us a good example. We ended up on this 6th Street property in Henrietta. So if I wanted to take a look at the tax information, I mentioned before that we've got the little links underneath the photo that allow us to jump into the realist tax information, the realist map, the neighborhood report. We also have all of that tax record information that'll show up in RPR as well. But instead of having to leave this system or go somewhere else or open up a new window, up here at the top, there's a tab that actually allows us to go directly into the tax information. So if you need to find out more about the person that owns the place or any of the details about the property from the perspective of the tax record, we can pull that up here. We also have the option to go over into the photos to see, again, just like we saw before, kind of a thumbnail view of all of the photos of the property. We also have the ability to check the history. Now, we mentioned the history was actually something that showed up on that first page underneath the details of the property, little clock icon. Now, what this is actually showing us is not only just the history of this particular transaction, like this listing itself, it also shows us any of the mortgage records or any of the previous listings for this property. Let me see if I can track down. Oh, here we go. So here we have a listing that's currently active. It's going to be showing up right up here at the top. We've got all the details about the information on this particular listing. It looks like it just was added and nothing has changed. We do have a listing here from, looks like 2009. Yep, here's our 2009. It was added in August. Looks like it went all the way through after a couple of, oh wow, pretty dramatic price decreases. And then it ended up expiring in February the next year. We also have another listing from earlier that year. It was originally listed on March 11th, or May 11th, excuse me, and then expired. Oh, actually it was released, excuse me. It was released by a different agent and then was added as a separate listing, looks like the same day. It does look like it ended up getting sold after the listing expired. So it was relisted in March and then sold in May. And then we've got our sales records from the tax record side of things. This is actually showing us not just the tax record, or not just the listing sales, but if the property had actually sold separate from that. So you may notice that this actually does have a transaction that occurred in between where we see our listing details from 2009 to 2010 and our new listing that was entered in 2021. There's also a sale here in 2015 where this individual bought it from this individual. And then we can also see, it looks like in 2015, there was also a loan taken out on it. So pretty simple layout on this. This is available for every single listing in our system. But as you guys saw when we were looking at a couple of these other ones, it may not always have a lot of detail on here just because there might not have been too much that has occurred with this particular property. In this case, it looks like this property has actually had a lot of transactional history that's only on the tax record, but doesn't have any listings for it. So this might have been a for sale by owner, another for sale by owner, and then finally this one here. And look at the dramatic increase in the value of this property. It's doubled. But anyway, so we've been exploring the tabs up here at the top. Let's go to the parcel map. This one's very basic. We've got a satellite view, shows in purple the highlight of this particular parcel. The map view, which looks like it's just a little bit off center from the details that are being provided by, is this Google? It's not showing the logo down at the bottom there. Oh, it's right there. So in this case, it actually looks like the street is just a little off kilter. We can see where the parcel lines are as well. And then there's also a contextual map. I mentioned that we're going to be looking at the map a little bit more in depth in a bit here. But whenever we initially click on that map icon or click on the address of the listing from the results page, this is what the page will look like that gives that pop-up that we saw earlier. So whatever we're looking at a particular listing's mapping, if we wanted to maybe combine that with some extra details, we can click on the map and add either a satellite view with the labels or without, or we can even add in some extra layers, like let's say if we wanted to find out whether or not this was in a flood zone or not, we can click on layers and do FEMA flood zones, or even find out if there's maybe zip code or a different zip code nearby, or if there's a different city line or a county line, even the unified school district. All of that information can be added on there. It's worth pointing out that whenever you guys are adding those extra details to the maps, they can sometimes get pretty cumbersome. Like in this case, there's not too much clutter to it, but if we were to do this in, let's say, Tulsa, there's going to be tons of different lines. I mean, even in the most tame areas of Tulsa, there's just a ton of different zip code lines and city lines and school district lines. Like it gets pretty hectic. It's also worth pointing out, whenever you're looking at the layers, certain layers may not actually show up if you zoom out too far. So as I was zooming out, notice it actually stopped showing me the FEMA flood zones. If I click back on the layers, you can see that I have zoom in order to be able to see parcel and flood zone information. So if I zoom back in, I can see the flood zones added. If I zoom in even further, now I see the parcel lines added. Of course, it's hard to see because of the flood zones. So if you guys do end up in a situation where it's gotten so cluttered that it's hard to actually be able to differentiate between each of the different lines or what they all mean, there is a clear all option. Just make sure to always put back that parcel option so that you guys can see where the parcel lines are. We'll talk about the map a little more in a bit. We also have the flood map area. So instead of having to add that extra layer whenever we get to the parcel map side of things, if you just go into the flood map option, it'll put that extra layer onto the map for you. And then it'll also show you the tax record information regarding the flood zone. So rather than having to kind of guess as to whether or not this particular property is located in the flood zone or not, you guys can actually just look at that information up here at the top. Makes it quick and easy. All right. So I've taken a look at this listing pretty thoroughly now. Let's say that instead of going next and back and so on and so forth, I actually want to just look at my list of listings again. Up here at the top, there's a single line display option. This allows me to jump back into my list of all of the properties that I found with that search criteria. So what I want to do is actually over here on the top, when I'm looking at my MLS number, you notice how it actually provides me with this little four-sided arrow, the same way that we saw whenever we were looking at the widgets at the beginning of class. I hold my cursor over the header section, and I can click and drag to move things around. Now, whenever I'm moving things around, this is actually only going to be changing the display for this current report. So if I'm looking at a brand new search, there's a chance that I might not actually see these layouts the same way. So for instance, if I ended up putting the price at the beginning and the MLS number at the end or something like that, if you guys end up coming back into Matrix the next day, it'll be gone. It'll go back to the system defaults and you guys won't have to worry about whatever you did to your search criteria. Now, that's not necessarily something that everybody would like. So for instance, if you do end up wanting to customize this and actually save that, there's a button up here at the top right that allows us to set the certain display that we have right now. So the display, the sort order, the count per page, etc., as my starting default. That means that the next time I start doing a search, it's going to remember all of the layouts that I had customized. So what order I had everything in. We also have the option to add in additional columns as well. Now, instead of doing the clicking and dragging, I'm just going to do a regular click. When I click on this address field, it pulls up a drop-down underneath that allows me to do a remove column or insert column. Some extra options on here, but I'll be honest, I don't think most people mess with those. What I do want to show is this insert and remove column. Now, when we did our search initially, we were searching for only product properties that were active. So this status over here on the left is actually pretty much, I mean, other than this one that's contingent, this is redundant. So I'm going to click on the column there. Again, just clicking on the blank space where it shows the four-sided arrow. I click remove column, and that just gets rid of it for me. Now, if I went through and under my search criteria, I had also done house for property subtype. Well, now this whole column is also redundant. So I can click remove column to get rid of it. Now, I'm giving practical examples just to make sure you guys are aware of how some people are using this, but this isn't necessarily the way that I would recommend it. If you do have redundant things like that you kind of just want to get out of the way, just remember you guys can just dump those over to the sides. They're kind of out of sight, out of mind, but still leaving it on there. But once we've actually added in some of those extra details, or removed some of those extra details, I can come back and do insert column. Now, insert column is actually going to allow us to see all of the different items that we can search by. So if you guys remember when we were looking at the option to add in different criteria to search, we have under this insert column option the exact same details. Now, there are some things that aren't going to show up properly, like if I do public remarks, that's going to take up a ton of space on there. But if I also wanted to maybe do something that was a little bit more practical, like, I don't know, adding the acres on there, since that's not a system default, we can type in on the search, click acres, hit apply, and now suddenly I've got a separate column that's just for my acres. Now, when we first get into the system, it's going to have a couple different sort methods that it's already going to be following. First and foremost, it always sorts by what the status is. Now, in this case, I've already removed my status column. Then it's going to be sorting by school district and price. You'll notice that the school district right now is set as the primary sort. We've got our price set as the secondary sort. So for instance, if we take a look down here, there's 3 different properties that are in Wagner. So on the school district, it's sorted all of them by school district. We've got 2 for Eufaula, 3 for Wagner, everything else is alone. But on these ones where we actually see multiple entries on the same school district, you'll notice that that's when it starts obliging the price sorting. So we see smallest to largest. And then again, down here on Wagner, smallest to largest. If I do decide that, all right, I've removed a couple columns, I've added in this acre columns, I actually want to sort by acres more than anything else. If I click on the acres name, notice what this does is it actually puts a nice thick arrow next to acres. I can reverse that so that I have largest to smallest. I'm just clicking on the arrow to reverse that. But then we also see that the school district, if I hold my cursor over that thinner line now, it says secondary sort. And then on the price, I've got an even thinner line, tertiary sort. So you can have up to 3 different sort methods at the same time. So I'm going to just show you guys an example here. If I click on garage, that sets it as my primary. I'm going to click on half bath, that sets it as my primary. Now garage is secondary. Click on full bath. Now my garage is tertiary, half bath is secondary, full bath is primary. So you can switch these around. I don't find that too many people are interested in really messing with the sort functions besides maybe 1 or 2 of them. But if you guys do have a lot of properties that are very similar in a very small area, oftentimes it might be helpful to have those. Just remember, if you guys need to reverse the order of something, you have to click the arrow. And whatever arrow you click will turn it into the primary sort. If you click it again, it'll finally reverse the order. So that's about it for our search results page. If I do end up wanting to save the layout that I have, I can save that as my starting default. I can reset back to the system default. There's also an option on here if I maybe wanted to customize a specific display for just right now. So like, let's say that I'm running a search and I wanted to display it for a client in a very specific order with very specific details added on here. Once I've actually added those on, there's a little button up at the top here that says Manage Display, and I can save this as a separate layout for future searches. Now, once I've saved that, it's going to show up under this display option here, where we can see this my prefix before a couple of these options, which is indicating to us that this is actually something that I've customized and turned into my display for future use. So for instance, if I do this my subs/acres, this is going to show me the school district, the address, the subdivision in acres. And if I wanted to produce a report with this, I can do that by using this print option down here at the bottom. And it'll remember that I have this sub/acres display. So again, if I wanted to adjust this a little bit, or say that I wanted to move my address screen over, save this as its own separate display, I just do Manage Display, and you can save it as something new, or in this case, if I've made a modification to it, I can save those changes. Now, that's about it for the customization and saving defaults and so on. Down here at the very bottom of the page are some extra options for the listings themselves. So rather than just showing how we're going to be displaying the results, I'm actually going to be doing something with these. Now, the actions screen by default only allows us to just jump back into the criteria that we use to search, or we can actually create a little stats option. We don't cover that in this class, but we do in the advanced matrix and realist class. Not too many people are using them, but they're pretty handy. But all the rest of these options are actually showing that they can't be clicked. So it's just blank. There's nothing really that we can do with these. If I hold my cursor over one of them, it'll actually tell me you need to select one item in order for us to be able to do this. Now, that's actually these checkboxes over here to the left. So if I click on a checkbox, notice that all of a sudden, all of these items down here at the bottom are open to us. If I wanted to email this off to a client, fairly simple. We select the item, we click on the email button, type in who we're going to want it to be sent to. So in this case, let's say that I have email@email.com. I can send this as a one-off to somebody. I just put in my subject and my email body. But what I would strongly recommend that you guys actually do is whenever you're sending something off to someone, save them as a contact first and foremost. The vast majority of the time, you're already going to have their first and last name. You're also probably going to have their email address in order to send them anything. So if we click on this Create New Contact button, you've already got the first and last name and their email. Those are also the only things that are required. So those little yellow marks are actually indicating the only things that you have to put in. So if I needed to put in somebody brand new, I just put in those details. And then later on down the line, if I needed to send them something new later, I can just be like, hey, I need to send this to George Foreman. Perfect. I send it off to George Foreman. I put in my details about this. Check this out. You'll be punching up to this deal. Perfect. So we send that off to them. And again, if you guys remember what I mentioned earlier, this is going to show on George's end a link inside an email. He clicks on that link and he's going to be able to view the One Home interface. So I'm going to hit cancel. We also have that print option. I'm actually going to select all of these and then click print. And I mentioned earlier that we had the my prefix for any of the customized displays. So when I'm just looking at the results, I can customize those, put them into whatever order I want. Whenever I go to print something, I actually will still have the exact same options. So if I wanted to print that view that has the my sub/acres, I can actually just go print PDF, preview, or even just print that off right away. So it makes it very easy to actually customize how you want your pages to be laid out. So like if you have directions or GPS coordinates or specifications of the property or whatever the case may be, you can customize those on the search results page, and then you can print those out as a report later. I also wanted to mention we have some pre-fashioned reports. that are going to allow you guys to just jump in, grab what you need, what you might need, and send that off to your printer. There are some of those reports that actually are not meant to be viewed by everyone. So in this case, what we're seeing here is we've got the agent 360, agent full with photos, agent thumbnail, agent summary. All of these are actually going to be displaying information that could potentially be confidential data. So compensation amounts, what the listing agreement type is, all those kinds of details that are not meant to be consumed by the public and subsequently cannot be printed off. So they labeled those handily for you as agent. And if we wanted to use one of those particular layouts, well, that's not a problem. You guys can actually see that there's the same exact items pretty much. The only thing that's different is the property view. The same exact items are going to be available on here for client side. Again, it just purges all of the details that the clients are actually not meant to see, so that way you guys are only sending off the details that they might need, but also includes everything that they, again, might need. Now, down at the very bottom of the screen, we also have a quick CMA 8.4, which is the current version. And then there's also a 3-up comparison. We're going to circle back around to that. Just keep that kind of bookmarked in your brain. We have a CMA button down here at the bottom. We're going to be covering this in this afternoon's class. Again, that's a 1-hour elective CE credit class if you're interested, from 1 to 2. We have a directions button. This allows us to do a mapping. So if we, I actually don't think I've done this many listings this far apart, but that's kind of funny. Pretty loop-de-loop there. But what it's going to try and do is effectively grab a specific listing, treat that as a starting point, and then find whatever listing is furthest away and treat that as an end point. So that way we can actually string along a whole bunch of different listings into a specific order. Now, if I do decide that I wanted to rearrange some of this stuff, over here on the right-hand side, we can move these up and down. This is a great way to change things for like showing tours and stuff like that. Just remember, once you've made those adjustments on which order you want to do this in, click directions, and then you can either email that or print it. Whoa, it's going to be quite a trek. Anyway, so I don't see too many people using that anymore. Most people just have a GPS, but it is still handy if you guys do have maybe properties that are located way far apart from each other, or, and this is actually the more practical use that I've heard people still using it with, vacant land. Getting directions to a vacant land, if you guys are doing a tour of some kind between different properties, that's an easy way to try and handle doing a tour like that. Next, we have our stats button. We've got it separated out into charts or tabular. The tabular one's the only one that I really think is that interesting. The charts one allows us to do a lot of cool history reports and stuff like that, but we don't cover that in our basic class. That's actually something we discuss in our advanced matrix and realist class. Head back one step. We also have an export option. For those of you guys who like working in Excel, this is an easy way for us to just go through and grab all of the details that we're interested in about this particular property, dump it into an Excel spreadsheet, and work with it from there. I don't see too many people using that, but I'm a huge proponent of Excel, so I like using that from time to time if there's some project that we're working on or details on a bunch of listings got fumbled in some way or something like that. I just dump everything into an Excel spreadsheet. Finally, we have our quick CMA option. The quick CMA option is a really handy button. As soon as you click it, it just immediately generates a report that separates all of your listings out into the different statuses that they're in. So in this case, all of these were active. It shows all the basic details about each of the different properties, including a min, max, average, and median. This is specific to each status. So if there was maybe a bunch of pending listings, all of the pendings would be collected together and then have their own min, max, average, and median. And then at the very bottom of the sheet, you're going to find a total listings and quick statistics. The total listings shows all of the listings, what the average square footage is, the price, so on and so forth. And then the quick statistics is going to summarize all of those again with list price, list to sale, sale to list. So if you guys are looking at, again, in this case, a quick CMA, you're going to be looking at a bunch of pending and closed properties anyway. So you'll see those sales price and what the percentages are for them. So if we notice that there's a bunch of minimum properties that are selling for pretty much the same price, maximum properties that are selling for less than what their list price was, what their average and median are, we can kind of guess that maybe we need to be a little bit more tempered in our opinion of what the price should be. So a lot of cool things that you guys can glean from these kinds of reports. Again, it's just a button click. That's it. You select the items, quick CMA, you're done. There is a showing time option on here. We don't cover this anymore. Showing time used to be our primary showing service, but they were bought out by Zoom, so we're trying to make a transition over to the Sentry Key showing service. We do have a class on that, by the way, that's I want to say that it ended up being a hot CE class instead of elective CE, but whatever. Anyway, so that's about it for our actions down here at the bottom. We also have a refine option. Let's say that I did end up sending all of these over to George. If I click on George's name, I can see what emails I've sent to him. So for instance, if I was doing a search that I'd already done before, and I wanted to make sure that I'm not sending him things that I've already sent, I can switch this over to George Foreman. I can see all of the listings that I've already emailed. And if there was one that I hadn't emailed that I wanted to, I can select them, go back over to actions, email, and send that over to him. So now when I go back to that refine option, I can see George Foreman, and I see that those two listings have been sent already. Interestingly enough, and this is something that I don't think people utilize as often as they should, if you guys switch over to the refine view on listings that you've already sent to a client, one of the cool things about this is that it'll also show if it's been favorited or discarded, and it'll also show if there's any notes that that particular client has added. So for instance, if they ended up liking something, you can see all of that information under the contacts section, which we'll cover a little bit later. But it's oftentimes easier just to see it all in one concise view like this. Now I'm going to switch back out to just the basic view. There's also a save option, which allows us to do a new saved search. I mentioned to bookmark this in your brain earlier, but when you go to the save search option, you just have to give it a name. Notice that's the only thing that's actually required on here. We don't have to connect it to a contact if we don't want to. We don't have to put it on the home page as a search. But if you guys do end up liking a specific search that you've done, or maybe if you guys set up a search that's going to be your stomping grounds, you can actually set up that favorite search, dump it onto your home page, and we'll say random there we go, save. And now when I'm back on my home page, I can come into work the next day, the next week, the next month, and there will always be this little random my favorite search. I click on it and it'll show me the most up-to-date information using the same search criteria I initially searched by. It's important to also note, this is a good reason why I always recommend, if you guys are using any of the alternative statuses, leave that relative search function built in. So like the 0 to 180 kind of thing, because what that'll end up doing is making sure that whenever you go back to that particular search, it'll just automatically have the correct time frame in there. So rather than accidentally, you put in maybe what date it was that you guys were searching by, and you really liked the search, so you saved it. Then you come back later and you're like, well, why am I not finding any listings that are active in this area? Well, maybe it's because you had a specific time frame set up. So, but next, let's go over to the save option again, and we've got new auto email. Now, new auto email, what this is actually allowing us to do is it's going to allow us to send all of the listings that happen to match this search criteria currently. So we have to assign it to a specific contact, give it a subject name. What this is actually going to do is when I send this listing collection out, it's going to be sending a welcome email that's actually letting my client know hey, I'm going to be sending you more listings like this in the future. If you accept, click on the link below. When they end up getting another listing that gets added into our system in Matrix that happens to match the same specifications as your search criteria, they will automatically receive this recurring email that's actually going to be sent out at a specific time frame we're going to cover in a second here. But it's going to go through and see if all of the specifications match and then send it off to your client automatically for you. So what the auto email function is effectively doing is it's taking a search that you guys have constructed. So here's all my criteria. And then it's going to be sending all of the listings that match that out as soon as possible on a daily basis, even twice a day if you wanted, or on a monthly basis. Now, with the market being still a little bit wild, I might recommend if you guys do end up setting an auto email, use that ASAP option. The daily emails might not always necessarily be fast enough, but what that boils down to is just you can send it out in the morning, which is going to be around 8 a.m., or in the evening, which is going to be around 6 p.m. Typically never before 8 or 6, but sometimes a little bit after. So just around that time frame is easy enough to say. There is the monthly option as well. I don't necessarily think that that's a great option. That's the perpetual tire kicker kind of person. But one of the cool things about the auto email function just as a whole is that if you do end up having someone that's asking for something incredibly specific, like let's say earlier when we were going through and trying to find the USDA rural development with the gated access and also gas range, just didn't find anything throughout the entire state. Well, that's fine. Let's say that I set up an auto email for that. So what'll end up happening is that I'm going to set this up to ASAP. If all of the specifications that I've added for my client are exactly the way that they want it, but we're not finding anything right now, if I leave this as an auto email, no results found right now, I send off the email, they accept it. A couple months from now, if somebody ends up adding something that matches their exact specifications, they'll receive an email as soon as it gets added into the system. So within 15 minutes of this listing being added, the client that's going to be interested in it right away is being notified. So when I initially got introduced to this concept, that was one of the first things I did was I actually set up an auto email search for an area in Berry Hill that just, it was really pretty street, great school district. My wife was like, oh, it's really pretty out there. So I set up an auto email. Of course, I never ended up getting any bites on it, even though the market's been wild. But that could be an easy way to at least get that client that, you know, they don't want just any house. They want an upgrade, or they want, you know, something very specific. You can build that in, build them a search, have them get emailed as soon as it cuts, as soon as the listing gets added with those specifications, and you can make some money. So last, we have the new speed bar shortcut. We don't cover that in this class. We do discuss that in our advanced matrix class, but the speed bar is actually this item up here at the top of the screen. I would strongly recommend that you guys learn how to use this. There's actually a button right here to the left that allows you guys to learn how to use that. All right. All right, let's move now to the carts. Carts are even more simple than most of the other things that we've covered so far. What a cart is actually just a random collection of listings. You can do this two different ways. You can either gather everything into just a regular cart. They've got a default option, which is just a brand new cart. You can also add in a new cart. So if you have a client that maybe they don't really have a specific area that they're searching in, or maybe the results aren't really connected by way of some kind of search criteria, you can just go through and say, all right, these are all the items for George. I'm going to add them as a contact cart. There we go. So now what's happened is that I've taken these 3 listings that, again, may or may not be from the same search at all. We can add those into that particular cart, and then we can present those to the client by clicking on this View Cart button. And I can say, hey, look, I've got these 3 listings for you. I've got a couple that I haven't emailed you yet, so I'm going to email those off, whatever the case may be. So the cart option is really handy if you do have somebody that's just kind of all over the place with exactly what it is that they like, or maybe they just go through and tell you, hey, I like this, that, and the other thing. Can you find me something similar? You can add all of those listings into a cart together. And one of the cool things about this is that the carts don't care what the statuses are. So for instance, way later on down the line, you guys find out that the property is pending or sold or expired, or whatever the case may be, but it was something that your client liked. You can kind of use that as a baseline for finding other properties that they may be interested in. So regardless of its status. All right. Now this is all well and good. I'm going to actually start a brand new search again. We're going to be doing a search this time using the map. I promised this a little bit earlier. Let's actually talk about how this functions. The map search actually can go one of 2 different ways. We've either got a button here for map search, or we can click on map at the top or bottom of the page. Either way that we do this, what it's going to do by default is show anything and everything that matches the criteria that we've already added. So at this point, none. But when I start zooming in, if I have a specific area that I was interested in, so like let's say that I wanted to do, let's do relatively midtown. So I've got this all pulled up here. Let's say that I wanted to kind of section off some areas in here, and I wanted to make sure that I'm only seeing listings that match my criteria that I've already filled in, or maybe I haven't even filled in any yet. And I wanted to make sure that they're only going to be located in a certain area. Now, we mentioned already on that location section of the search, we can do school district, city, county, zip code, township range, section, even subdivisions or grade schools, whatever. But if I have a little bit less codified version of where I'm actually wanting to search, what I can do is use this draw radius option, and then just expand this out by clicking and dragging and setting it up with whatever the space is that I'm wanting to search within. Notice what this does is it actually gets rid of all of the other listings that were outside that area. So now I've only got 27 listings that are actually going to be showing up here. And if I need to maybe make an adjustment to this, I can click on the edge to drag that in or out. So if it was too much, I can drag that in. If I needed to move it, I have to drag the pin itself. So I can move that over here. And then if I needed to get rid of this particular shape, hold my cursor over that red dot and do delete shape. Easy peasy. Now there's also a rectangle tool. This one works the exact same way. Click and drag, and I can make that shape. I can adjust it by clicking on the edges of it. And again, this is excluding any of the listings that are outside this area. Now we also have an alternative option. Instead of doing the little dot and then doing delete shape, this time I'm actually going to hit this little clear all shapes option. Now I'm going to use instead the draw polygon tool. I actually had somebody explain this in a way that I hadn't heard before, and I really like it. The draw polygon tool kind of works the same way that those conspiracy theory boards work. So I'm going to click in one spot. That's like adding the pin to the board. And then notice the little faint blue line that's following my cursor as I'm moving it around the screen. This is going to be the line as soon as I click, it adds another pin, and that line becomes solid. Now when I'm moving my cursor out again, it's going to be treating it like the string being pulled. I drop a pin, pull the string, click, pin, pin, click, and so on. So I'm going to come back up here. There we go. So here's my wife's version of Midtown. And so now I've locked myself into a space. And again, the handy part about this is that if I go back to my criteria and start adding in, let's say price, I want to do 250 minus. We've got 24 matches. I want to make sure that there's 3 or more bedrooms. Cool, that'd be nice. 15 matches. I also wanted to make sure that there's 0.5 acres or more. No matches. 2.5 acres or more. Oh my gosh, there's still 2 matches. All right. So again, within the area that I've confined myself to, I can go back into my results now with confidence that these are only going to be found in the areas that my client was interested in. So here we have a particular property that might be of interest. We can take a look at it by clicking on the listing data, go back to our listing tab, learn more about it. And if I wanted to email this to a client, here's all my actions down here at the bottom. Or I can go back to my single line display, find the listing, and email it off. Now, we've talked a little bit about the contacts that we've been adding. I've been using George Foreman as an example. I'm going to send him this email. Now let's actually talk about how to find the contact information. Up at the top there, under My Matrix, we've got a section here for all of our saved searches. This is going to be all of the saved searches, not just the ones on your homepage. Here's our auto emails that we set up earlier. So for instance, if we had that auto email for that one client that had that really esoteric criteria, couldn't find anything right now, but we're going to find it later. We can check that auto email here. We can see any of the emails that we've sent to anyone. But if I want to get a comprehensive look at everything that I've done with a client, whether it's emails that I've sent, auto emails that I've set up, whatever, if I go to contacts, it shows my complete list of everybody that's involved. And I can click on any individual. So like here with George Foreman, I can see all of the CMAs that I've created for him, all of the searches that I've done for him. And then if I click on send email, I can see all of the emails that I've sent off to this individual as well. Oh, I clicked on the wrong George Foreman, that figures. There we go. So here's the one that I sent earlier this year. Here's another one that I sent earlier today, and this most recent one that I just sent. I also wanted to mention something important about the contacts. After you guys have created it, remember there was just the 3 pieces of information required, first, last, and email. There's going to be a little edit button up here at the top. On the edit screen, you get to see all of the different items that you can add on here. So for instance, we added a note about this contact. We can also add in the contact's address as well. And you can even change what kind of category they're in. So for instance, whether they're a buyer, seller, prospect, friend, investor, you can add that information in there. So I think that actually should be about it. I feel like I've breezed through some of this a little bit too quickly for some reason, because usually we don't have this much time left over, but I guess I'll just open the floor. Do you guys have any questions at the moment? Is there anything that you guys would like me to cover real quick before we end the course? Oh, thank you. Yeah, if you guys do end up having any questions or problems, let me actually pull this back up on the screen. If you guys have any questions or problems, once you're actually using this practically and you guys are wanting to learn more about it or find out if it can do certain things, you can always get in contact with us at the service desk. I'm going to put our contact info back up on the screen in a second here. But yeah, get in contact with us. Don't hesitate. We've got staff available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. So if you ever need any assistance at all, just reach out to us and ask. There's no dumb questions except for the ones you guys don't ask. So if you have something that seems really simple or easy, don't worry about it. We want to make sure that you guys get all of the assistance that you could ever need. We're trying to also improve some of our training options. Oh, my name is Mike Dane, Anthony, thank you. We're going to be doing a asynchronous training is what it's called. So what it's going to be providing you guys with is, instead of having to show up to these live classes, we're going to have a pre-recorded version of the content, and we're also going to be working to try and get every class to be CE credit. So what will eventually happen is that you guys can actually get on, on a Sunday afternoon, if you guys wanted to get some CE credit knocked out, you can sign in, watch a couple pre-recorded videos, answer a couple questions about the content of those videos, verify that you actually paid attention effectively. And then that's it. You guys get the CE credit, you guys learned something, you can go back and review the videos. There's even a search option in the transcripts and stuff like that. So it's very good. We're trying to make sure that this is going to be as useful as it can be for everybody, especially since there's so many people that are kind of doing this on the side. We don't want to kind of preclude them from being able to get what they need. All right. But yeah, since it seems like we're all good to go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and present our phone number. And if you guys do have any problems, just get in contact with us. I'd love to hear from you. And hopefully I will see you guys in a future class. Stay warm during this crazy winter storm that we got going on. It's a little bit chilly outside. There we go. All right. Well, I'm going to leave that up for a minute. You guys can head out if you would like. Thank you guys again for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you guys in the future.